Hi guys, and welcome back to the Early Bird Photo News. I've not been feeling the best the last 2 weeks and it has been raining non-stop, so I haven't been able to do as many things as I wanted to, and I actually still haven't managed to look through all the 16,000 images that I took on my recent Cape York trip. I did manage to go through all my video footage, and that brought back some amazing memories of being surrounded by just wilderness and only listening to the sounds of nature far away from most other people, and then also seeing and photographing the rare and endangered golden-shouldered parrots. So all in all, a great trip, and I just love being surrounded by nothing else than termite mounds and beautiful birds. One thing I noticed, however, when going through the 16,000 images, that something wasn't quite right with my RF f4 600mm prime lens. A lot of the images, basically all images taken with the electronic shutter, showed some weird sort of movement or wobbles in the images. It's mainly visible when there's vertical elements in the shot, just like the termite mound. That's where I noticed it first. So for now, unfortunately, the lens is back with Canon CPS to check out whether it's the lens or the camera or a combination of the both. So for the time being, Canon has given me an EF version 3 600mm prime lens, which is essentially or more or less the same lens as the RF version, still nice and light, so I'm going to be using that for a while. Not a great situation overall, but to look at it on the bright side, now I will have used every single 600mm prime lens that there is from version 1, 2, 3 and the RF version. So when I get my lens back and make a proper review for all of you guys, I will actually have used all the 600mm lenses and then should have a great idea of which one I like the best. I wasn't actually sure if I should share all of this with you, but at the same time, a lot of you guys have been asking, Jan, what happened with the RF 600mm lens? Why are you not talking about it at all? So I thought it's time for a little update, and I also want to be always honest with you guys and not only share the pretty happy things, but also the things that may not go right all the time. So I hope you appreciate this update, and I hope that next time or in a few videos time, I will be able to give you a positive update on that lens as well. In the meantime, I will finish to go through all the images that I took at Cape York, but having all these wobbles in the images definitely makes it a little bit harder to pick the best ones, and that's why it's been taking me a little bit longer as well. Talking about bird images and going through a lot of bird images and editing them, if that's something that you want to learn and to master to make your own images look amazing, I would highly recommend that you check out my masterclass and pro sets down there in the description. With my pro sets, I give you the perfect ability with just one click to transform your dull and gray raw image into a great starting point for the editing process. And after that, in my masterclass, I teach you step by step all the necessary tools and things that you need to know in Photoshop to make your own images look amazing. So if that's of interest to you, make sure to check both of these out down there in the description. It looks like APS-C crop factor cameras are making a big return. For years, it has been very quiet. Canon didn't have any mirrorless APS-C cameras. Sony had a few, but they didn't really push that line any further, and Fuji was making some cameras. But now suddenly we have the R7, we have the R10, and there's also been a rumor this week that there will be another entry-level APS-C camera, the R100, that will sit below the R10, somewhere around the $500-600 mark, and that might be coming later this year or early next year. So there's definitely a lot of movement in the APS-C market. And last week, for instance, we also saw Fujifilm announce the X-H2S camera with a 1.5 crop factor and a great Sony crop sensor that should also deliver great performance. And it's just interesting to see now that so many of these camera manufacturers seem to push in that area, release APS-C lenses. Like Fujifilm released 150-600mm lens. Canon has been releasing some zoom lenses with the R7 and the R10, and there's definitely more to come. And even Sony has been releasing some vlogging wide-angle APS-C lenses, and there's also rumor that Sony will be releasing another BSI stacked sensor APS-C camera, and possibly something in the ZV-1 lineup, the vlogging cameras. But we also may see a successor to the Sony A6400, maybe an A6800 or an A7000, although it has been very quiet in that sort of lineup. But would that be something that you would want to see if you're a Sony shooter, or are you totally happy with the Sony full frame cameras? I think an 7000 with a 1.5 crop factor would definitely be a camera that a lot of people would be interested in, because it should usually come at a much lower price point than the full frame cameras. And of course, when Canon, Sony and Fujifilm are releasing new APS-C cameras, Nikon also doesn't want to be far behind, and it seems like they're working on releasing a new APS-C mirrorless camera, the Z30. So going by the name, it probably sits somewhere around or below that Z50 lineup, probably successor to the Z50, so more of an entry-level mirrorless camera. But I think at some stage Nikon will hopefully also give us a successor to the D500, like a professional level grade mirrorless camera with a crop factor. Is that something you would be interested in as a Nikon shooter? Talking about Nikon and Sony, I also read an interesting feud this week because people discovered that the sensor in the Nikon Z9 camera is actually a sensor made by Sony. And there was a bit of a fight on Nikon rumors and Sony alpha rumors, where Sony fanboys said, yes, we know Nikon can't live without Sony, and Nikon shooters of course saying it doesn't matter as much. And of course, it doesn't really matter in the end. If Nikon can buy a great sensor from Sony, that's probably the best way forward for them. But at the same time, it can put them at a slight disadvantage, because Sony might not want to sell them their best of the best sensors. And a camera company like Canon that makes their own sensors might also have a competitive advantage down the track. But all in all, the sensor in the Z9 is great, and for us as photographers, it really doesn't matter who makes it. On another Nikon related news, it seems like Nikon is getting ready to release another prime lens on their roadmap, the f4.5 400mm lens, which seems quite compact, which is 23 centimeters or 9 inches and 1.2 kilos or 2.6 pounds. So definitely a nice and small package. For me personally, the most surprising aspect when looking at the Nikon roadmap is that there's no 5.6 500mm PF lens in the new mirrorless lineup. Because for me, or for many people in the past, that 5.6 500mm lens was one of those lenses that we always looked at thinking it would be great to have that lens. And I actually know a lot of people who switched over to Nikon so they could use like a D850 with that 5.6 500mm lens, and they did a great job for them. So Nikon apparently abandoning this lens in the mirrorless lineup is quite a surprise to me, because at the same time, like this 4.5 400mm lens sounds nice, but it doesn't make as much sense to me personally. I really kind of struggle to see where you would use that lens, and you guys let me know in the comments, where do you think is the best use case on f4.5 400mm lens? For me, it's a bit of an interesting focal length because it seems a little bit short for prime lens, and there's already some fantastic zoom lenses around, like the 100 to 400mm zoom lens that's not as wide open, but at the same time offers you a lot more flexibility being a zoom lens, and it can also take the 1.4 extender. So while the prime lens will obviously have a better bokeh and shoots more wide open, so you can have faster shutter speed and it's better in low light, overall I'm not quite sure where this lens slot in and who's really excited about this lens, but maybe you can let me know in the comments. Apple has also this week released a few new MacBooks, a MacBook Air 13-inch and a MacBook Pro 13-inch with their new M2 chip that seems to be even more powerful than last year's M1 chip. So if you're in the market for a new small laptop like this M1 MacBook Pro that I bought last year, I think the new MacBook Air seems like a fantastic choice. It comes in some nice colors, but it also seems to be a great compromise of weight, price, and performance. So if I was in the market today for a new MacBook, I would probably be looking at that MacBook Air with the M2 chip. Personally, I also have an M1 Max MacBook Pro 16-inch, but I must say most of the time I'm actually using this smaller computer because it's just so much nicer to handle. It's small enough, the battery lasts very long, and still powerful enough for most tasks. So if I was looking at one today, I would definitely be looking at that M2 MacBook Air. Are you in the market for a new MacBook? Do you not like Macs at all? Let me know in the comments. Recently, I've also pimped my tripod a little bit. I bought this really right stuff cradle clamp that allows me very easily to open and close the clamp on the tripod, and it makes it so much easier to put my lens on and off the tripod. Before, I had this annoying kind of knob where I had to screw on this screw all the time, and it just So you can see it actually bend over time, and it's just hard to sometimes get the lens on, or sometimes you put the lens on an angle and then close the screw and you don't notice that it's not actually in, and it may fall off your tripod. All this won't happen anymore with this nice cradle clamp. You open it, put your lens in, close it. It's not the cheapest thing, but it's definitely something that made my life much easier. And this is a really right stuff one, but it also works perfectly on the Wimberley head. We're gonna head off on a road trip to Cairns very soon. I was actually thinking whether I should upgrade my Mavic 2 drone for that trip. I'm looking at the Mavic 3. I haven't used it yet, but have you guys? I've read a lot of mixed kind of reviews. It seems to have gotten better a lot with the latest firmware, so there's a lot more to do, or you can have a lot more control over the drone now. But for instance, that telezoom camera on top doesn't seem to deliver very good quality, but all in all, it still seems like a good drone that would deliver slightly better footage than what the Mavic 2 can do at the moment, especially in those kind of low light sunset or sunrise situations. So looking at the drone now, I have to make a decision probably this week or early next week. So if you have any inputs on drones or whether you think a Mavic 3 might be worth it, let me know down there in the comments. I know the Mavic Air 2S is probably the best value for money drone at the moment, but for filming especially, I find it very annoying that it has a fixed aperture, so I can't actually change the aperture when flying, which means when you're filming, you would have to constantly change ND filters on the drone. And if you're flying in one direction, your exposure will be fine. If you're flying in the other direction, it won't work anymore. So I find that very annoying, and I definitely prefer drones that have a variable aperture that I can change on the remote. So if you have any inputs in terms of drones, definitely let me know in the comments. And that also wraps up the early bird photo news for today. I hope you enjoyed the show. Like always, I'll keep you updated what's going to happen with my lens, and I try to make as many videos as possible on my road trip as well. And I will also release an R3 review and an R3 versus R5 video very soon. So stay tuned for that. Make sure to leave me your thoughts in the comments. Give me a thumbs up for this video. Subscribe to my channel. And if you have a few cents left over, I always appreciate a super thanks as well. So see you next time, guys. Bye.